Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Are we recording?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hey guys, it's KJ from For Life Coaching. I'm here today and beyond my expectations. I'm here today with Coach Hamilton Cuthrell, former USA Olympics invitee, and also strengthening coach, training coach, and a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. I'm also here with our two interns for Beyond My Expectations, Ethan and George. And what we're here today to do, what we're here today to talk about motor control. So we understand like the big motor movements, the gross motor movements. We talked about that recently with Coach Dawson. But what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit more about some of the little things that we might overlook that are important in reaching our greatest potential with regards to overall health as well as athleticism. So I'm going to hand this over to Ethan today, and he's going to start the conversation with Coach Cuthrell about motor control. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ethan Bradley Fu. I'm an intern here at Beyond My Expectations. And first off, I just want to thank you, Coach Cuthrell, for lending us your time today. And
Anytime.
so starting off, the sports that I personally do, I'm a martial artist, so I take part in Taekwondo, and then I also did a little bit of wrestling before I got out on injury. But essentially, Taekwondo has been a year-round sport. You know, you can do it indoors, you can do it outdoors, you can do it anywhere. And I've been doing it for just over a decade now, so I've got quite a bit of experience in it. But one of the things I was wondering that I'd like to ask you is, are there any specific training methods that you would recommend, I guess, for improving your motor skills, like in general, because Taekwondo requires a lot of motor skills. You know, you got to be able to balance, you got to be able to, in some cases, be flexible, but not in all cases. And then you just got to have good control over your body.
Right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you said, is there certain programs?
Yeah, like what area of exercising would you recommend to improve your motor skills the most? Whether it be like cardio, weightlifting, stuff like that, cross training. Is there a specific training method that you would recommend?
Yeah.
Coach Cuthrell, one thing, can you just explain motor control for some people who may not know it?
Sure. Motor control, quite just simply put, is the way the nervous system interacts with other systems in the body to help you pretty much move. So a lot of people, when they focus on exercise, when they focus on sport, they just try to focus on the muscles, right? But it starts somewhere. So there's a relationship between the nervous systems and other major systems in the body. So what we have to do is do exercises and things to strengthen that reaction and those signals to ultimately help the body move safely and properly. And to answer your question, I would focus on cross training. There are certain, in your sports, there are certain skills, what we call sport specific skills that you do and you work on. But I would not only do just those skills, I would also do things like cardio. I would do things, for example, wrestling. I've had people do things like yoga, do things like Pilates, where yoga is also where you're doing a lot of what we call isometric type works, where you're doing a hold. You get in position and you hold it and you have to balance. You have to breathe and focus on breath and things like that. That hits that elicits a different response from dynamic movement, like you would do sometimes in your wrestling or Taekwondo. I would do that, but I would do what we call periodization, which is you'll do a period of, it's a year-long program, and then you break it up into sections. So where the first section you would do work on, I like to do a wide base of just conditioning. That's why I do a lot of what I guess would consider motor control type exercises. In other sports, it would be considered all season, right? So where I would do balance, I would introduce a lot of yoga, I would introduce a lot of cardio, and I would do, when I do strengthening, it would be balancing for example, unilateral exercises, i.e., if I'm doing a squat, I would do a one leg squat. If I'm doing deadlifts, I do a one leg deadlift. Things of that nature. To build up not only strength but your motor control. So your body has to say, okay, we have one leg, so we got to balance. So we got to shift the balancing point. So it's causing is asking for placing a demand on that nervous system to respond. Then as we, next unit may be more of a strengthening. So now as we build, we have the movement patterns correct. And as we build, before we start putting what we call load, we call that load, we mean weight. Before we start putting different weight, even if it's just body weight on you, we have the movement patterns, the nervous system is primed, right? And now we can start adding weight onto it. So I would use that in the front end and then have sections all throughout the year.
As a football player, what would you recommend to basically practice all those things you just talked about? Because I know football isn't a year-round sport. I could do track or could do wrestling, but just in that off-season time, instead of just sitting around, lazing around, what could I do personally to, get myself in shape and ready for the next season?
Well, here's the thing: where in the strength and conditioning world, all sports are all year-round sports because we never stop. You have a in season, we have a postseason, we have an off season, and we have a preseason. And so after is a postseason where you would rest. All right. But then when you would start the preseason, as you would know, like in you have what we call spring football or spring ball. That's getting ready to go into like the off season. So things that I would do if you are running or warming up, something simple like do the warm-ups when on your own barefoot. When you go outside, you're doing it barefooted. Now your body and your ankle, your foot, it's a different dynamic. So you have to focus on balancing. You have to focus on different foot strikes and stuff. With the responsibility of the shoe that we place on the shoe, now your foot has to, all the muscles in your foot, all the muscles in your ankles and your calves have to take over that shock absorbent and creating signals, shooting it to your brain, shooting it back to your foot. This is how we need to work and be placed. So little things like that. Like I said, instead of going back to balancing, instead of doing a single leg, instead of doing deadlifts where you're loading up the weight, I would start off for a few weeks doing single leg deadlifts. Maybe if with no weight is too light, with some dumbbells in your hand, things like that. And then go back and build up, but it should be sectioned off. And then the off season, that's when you started really pushing more weight, getting stronger than the previous year, building up until the preseason and then the season. So each section of that, you would have to break it down into that section and you would have to work on specific things. But the ultimate goal is when you're coming to competition season, your season of football, you're getting strong. You're stronger than when you started the previous season, right? Yeah. So we're, first of all, preventing injury by building the motor control, by strengthening the tendons and the ligaments and the muscle. We're preventing injury by focusing on the proper movement patterns. And then we're building strength. So now that you're more powerful, more dynamic, and stronger in competition. With Taekwondo and wrestling, it's a bit different because we would call that right now, it's when you figure out, I have a match, I have a what we call fight. The skills, it changes. Now we're preparing for that specific match or that specific tournament. In wrestling and it might be a little bit different in Taekwondo because wrestling has a season to where there's competition, regular competition. In Taekwondo, it may not be a specific season, so to speak. It may be we have a certain tournament coming up. And ideally, what you would do, almost like a boxer, you would go into like what we call a camp, so to speak, to where we're focusing on that tournament or on that match coming up. And there are things that everything that I'm talking about will be equivalent to his off season. So you're doing like having a wide base of conditioning, which is not only cardiovascular conditioning, you will also do muscle endurance, to where if you're doing any type of weights or things like that, the ideal is that you have longevity in it, but you're also doing working on your motor control, where your nervous system is being conditioned by doing different movements, things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. And I
Coach
kind of want to
Cuthrell,
loop
thank you.
back.
Hold on.
Just
Coach
one quick
Cuthrell, I
thing.
just want to say thank you so much for your time with the questions and everything. We're going to be back to you in a second. So this was great insight on what can be done with year-round sports versus seasonal sports, and how to continue to maintain control,
Right.
muscle control, or develop the muscle control that is needed. All right. Thanks again for everything. Guys, say thank you, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
Okay.